I was out for dinner with a Scarecrow the other night, but he didn't eat much. He was already stuffed. Be sure to subscribe to my channel. Hello, I've been reading a lot of these and decided I should share my story. If you are looking for a name to this story, all I can give you is a nickname, Fox. I live on the border of Illinois and Wisconsin and often go between the two. I work in Wisconsin and live in Illinois. I'm going to give you some background information. I drive a Honda Ridgeline with the headlights so faded that you need the bright sun to see in front of you, and I'm going to give this story in 4 events. Event 1. Virus. This happened about a year before all the other events but is just as important. I was a junior in high school and I got really sick. I was so sick that I couldn't move or I'll be in pain or throw up. One night, the 4th one, I won't ever forget. I was having a nightmare about a scarecrow that I've never seen before. He was a tall figure made out of wood. They were nailed together and had an old, torn up pair of overalls that were brown and a tan flannel shirt with hay coming out of every part that was open except for his elbows, which were just jointed pieces of wood, and his right hand, which was just a sharpened piece of wood, spear-like. His other hand had a glove on it. His head was the worst part. He had a sack full of hay with this evil grin like from Batman and a brown hat on. His eyes and mouth though were glowing orange like flames. I was laying in bed with him at the other end staring at me. As soon as he moved toward me, I woke up sweating with fear. During the whole time I was screaming no, which my dad told me just a few days ago. I could sleep for the rest of that night. When I got out of bed that morning, I noticed something I never saw before, a spot of ash in the shape of 5 fingerprints. I didn't think much over it and went to school, not knowing the horrors that were to come. Event 2. It's real. I was leading a boring life with nothing different from everyone else from the last event. I go to school, I have a job, and I'm trying to get a girlfriend. But I started to notice something on my way to work on Sundays. It was just the beginning of fall and Halloween stores started to show up. I was driving one day and saw that a new thing was put up near a house I passed every weekend. It was a scarecrow. I thought it was strange, but I didn't think much about it at the time. So I continued to work as usual. It's 5:29 and I was just finishing cleaning the floor and locking up. I am usually the last person there, so I have to do much of the cleaning, and I started to head to my truck. This was until I heard a cry from an animal. I grabbed my flashlight and looked around. I work at an airsoft field, so we have a town and 100 acres of woods that are part of the field. So I ran through the town and was going through to call my boss, who loves animals and has raccoons as pets, to come and help, but he didn't answer. I was getting closer. I can see movement from the direction of the notice, so I continued to run. I finally get to the animal and see that it was a baby fox, but it had a slash on its side like someone tried to stab it. Being me, I took off my sweatshirt and wrapped it and carried it off to the parking lot. When I picked it up and started walking, I noticed that I had just run to the complete another side of the field. I was about halfway and felt like I was being watched, so I turned around. Then I saw it, glowing orange eyes in the distance about 100 feet behind me in the deepest part of the forest. Then out of nowhere, my boss called me, the scariest part of the night, asking why did I call him, so I told him about the fox and he grabbed the ATV and drove out to pick me up. But by the time I looked back up after looking down at the fox, the eyes were gone. The fox ended up staying with my boss for the night, and by the time we were done doing makeshift stitches it was 11:47. I finally got into my truck and drove home. When I passed the house with the new scarecrow, I noticed it was missing, and that was the moment I put 2 to 2 together. Event 3. the following. Every time I pass the house I look at every detail of the Scarecrow, and sure enough it was the same as event 1. I've also noticed that every week he moves slightly. It has been about 3 months and had more about 15 feet from his original position. I thought that it was probably just the owners of the house who were moving it, so I didn't make it a big deal. Until I was coming home from a long day at work during the first week of November. I was driving and I started to fall asleep at the wheel. I closed my eyes for 2 seconds unaware where I was, and I opened my eyes just aware of what had happened to me, and just in time as well. I see a humanoid figure moving across the road. I slammed on my brakes but it was no use, I hit it. I stopped and started to call 911 as I was opening up my door to rush over to see if the person I just hit needed help. But the closer I got to the figure, the more I noticed what it was. It was the Scarecrow. I held my breath as the 911 operator asked what my issue is. I didn't answer, so I guess they send police to see what happened if you call, because 2 police cars were coming. I can hear and see the lights 8 minutes later. So I decided that it was safe enough to see what happened to the front of the car. So without thinking I went to the front and saw a huge dent with hay everywhere. So I picked up my phone and called my dad and turned around and saw it has vanished. The cops arrived and started to ask me questions. I don't remember what they asked and what I responded with, but all I remember is thinking where it went. It was about 7 o'clock, about 1 hour and 45 minutes since I left work, and I was finally allowed to leave, so I was back in the road and got home 10 minutes later. I was so tired when I go home that I couldn't even care about the rant that my parents had for me at home. I was finally allowed to go to bed at 8:30 and started to go upstairs. I got halfway up the stairs until I saw a glow coming from my neighbor's house. I turned to look and saw it looking at me. But this time it was different from all other times. It didn't care if I saw it moving, so it grabbed the neighbor's kid who was home alone and to my surprise stuck his right hand into his chest and pulled it out in one movement so fast it was inhuman. Its spear-like hand was dripping with blood, pointing at me. I screamed at the top of my lungs and turned towards the door screaming 911. As the kid fell to the ground he waved at me with his other hand and walked away. I ended up breaking my parents' front door trying to open it so fast and ran across the street. I ended up breaking a window to get inside with my parents following, saying I'm crazy. As soon as I got inside I knew it was too late for the kid, but I tried my best, mimicking what I saw in movies to help try to save him as my parents finally understand what happened. So at 9:12 the cops and paramedics were called and arrived 6 minutes later. The cops questioned me how I knew he was stabbed. I told them about seeing it happen in the front window. They then asked me if I saw who did it. I thought about this. I knew if I told them the truth it would make me sound crazy, but if I didn't say the truth it would be a wild goose chase. So I told them the truth and the cop's face turned dead. He looked at me with a look like he had just seen a ghost and told me, and I would never forget these words, "Don't say anything about this happening. You didn't see the person, got it?" And knew this was something bigger than myself and that I had to tell the public. I was released at 2:29 and I finally decided I'll try to go to sleep, so I got into bed and looked out my front window and saw it peeking around the corner of the house with his grin. Event 4. The Flare. This was the last sighting I have had with the Scarecrow. It was November 17, 2019, I was driving to work still thinking of the kid across the street and thinking about the Scarecrow. I was passing the house when I noticed a flare on the side of the road. I stopped in front of it and got out and took a look. I didn't see anything at first glance. I started to stomp out the flare because it was starting a small fire when I saw a trail. I decided I was going to investigate, but because of the recent events, I grabbed one of my airsoft guns that looked too real and a person won't be able to tell the difference and headed out. I followed the trail into the woods up to the Scarecrow pull on the house's yard, but it wasn't there. I saw more tracks, but this time it was scaring me. It was a trail that looked like something has been dragged by someone. I followed this trail to the house itself. It just got too extremely terrifying when I saw the door was open. At that time I called the cops, and just at that moment, I saw it no more than 10 feet away waiting for me inside the house. I don't think it knew that I saw it. I saw that the garage was open as well, so I walked over there and saw a lighter and bug spray. I decided I was going to burn the thing out. I walked back to the door and started to spray as soon as I kicked it open, and to my luck, it lit him, but in the most terrifying way. It was his head, making it glow orange like in my dream. He started to walk toward me and took a swing at me with his arm, cutting my right arm that I used as a shield to protect my body. I did this for a few seconds when I hit him with the bug spray again. This time it reached further down its body, and started to burn his wooden limbs. I thought about this and continued to block his attack over and over again. After about 4 minutes of constant swings, I had cuts all over my right arm and left, as well as a few on my body. I was in so much pain that I finally fell over and couldn't do anything anymore. It stood there over me, and for the first time I heard it say something. It was, "I'm surprised you lasted this long. You should have died that night when you were sick." But at that moment his whole body was in flames now, and finally, the flames were burning through the wood and charred its arm. It fell with a thud on the concrete, and it looked and said one thing: "What, impossible?" At that moment he started to fall apart due to the flames burning its joints and hay. At that moment I heard sirens, completely forgetting I called the cops. I looked at the Scarecrow for the final time and saw the face of him giving me a grin as flames came out of his eyes. Right before I blacked out. I woke up in a hospital 2 days later, and to the police looking at me. One of the two of them walked closer to me and said they were attacked by a family of raccoons. And just like that, they started to walk off as my family came up to me. They started talking nonsense. But all I can think of is what I had just experienced, and I told my parents that it wasn't raccoons, and they only agreed with me because they thought I was dreaming. So I turned over to pretend to be tired and looked out the window. Can't believe that it wasn't staring at me. But I couldn't help but feel like I was still being watched. Ending. I still have dreams about the Scarecrow, and I still think of the events of what has happened 3 months ago. I still wake up sweating, but I haven't seen the Scarecrow since event 4. Since then the house was never bought because of the family that died there. The family that lived at the Scarecrow's house all was murdered. That I learned through research. People at my school think I am crazy. And even my girlfriend makes fun of me by making a Scarecrow outfit. But every morning I can't help but feel it presents near, and whenever I go outside after Sunday I find hay on my truck. I'll continue to do more updates if I get more events to add.